Hello and welcome today on the part 3 of our series on Tushar Mehta's book, which is titled aptly The Bench Bar and the Wizard. We're going to delve into chapter titled Black and White, in black and white, which speaks about in court etiquette, how are things sort of the interactions happen between the bar and bench and also amongst the lawyer themselves, and also some very interesting anecdotes from inside court. And my panelists today are going to discuss the chapter with me along with some of their own experiences. I have with me Senior Advocate Vivek Kohli, Senior Advocate Percival Bilimoria, Advocate Namisha Gupta. Welcome all of you and thank you for your time. At the outset, I'm going to request Senior Advocate Vivek Kohli for his opening comment.
Thank you, Tarun, for having me over. It's an interesting chapter in this book, written with the typical flair that Mr. Mehta has in court also while presenting his arguments. But in a sense, if you see, aside of the fact, the importance of the uniform, the discipline, the oneness that it represents, the conduct and the character which it lends, the dignity to the institution. Aside of that, if you look at the argument which is presented as the fundamental of why you should be allowed to wear whatever you want to wear in court, is that it's free speech and expression, and therefore I should be allowed to do whatever. Now, it's fine. I mean, I understand the logic of it, but let's also compare it to the sense of what the judicial function is. The judicial function is essentially a rational reflection, as Mr. Mehta puts it in his chapter, and which is, born out of a neutral viewpoint and rational and concludes in an indifferent judgment, which is it doesn't partake any partisan view or it doesn't favor one or the other. So the three important things are a rational reflection, neutral viewpoint, and an indifferent judgment. Now flip it with the examples that are given in the chapter. So the first example that is given is where you have, political beliefs, a button, where you go and you do it. Now imagine this, you go to court with a button, and if the judge allows you to break the decorum and, present your arguments with that button, it's a death wish. In no-win situation, if you deliver a judgment against the lawyer, it could always be construed as against his political beliefs, and therefore the judge is biased. If you actually give the judgment in favor of the lawyer, it could be viewed as sort of a common belief between the judge and the lawyer, and therefore the judgment in his favor taints the very essence of the judgment. The possibility of tainting it is always there, right? So, I mean, political beliefs outside the courtroom are best. Inside the courtroom, we should be struggling with facts, the legal provisions, and the presentation. And free speech should actually be given a rest insofar as expressing it in these manner is concerned. Look at the other example of religious attire. Now, let me ask you a question. If a man comes out in religious attire in court, what is the impression you're straight away conveying of saintliness, truthfulness, trustworthiness, nobility? Now, it confuses the message, the argument with the messenger. And anybody who's hearing it will give you, sort of a little bit of a leeway that a person coming from this background, the clergyman example that he takes in the chapter, it will always confuse the message and the messenger, which again has the potential of influencing the judgment of the jury or the judge in either case. Now, that kind of a thing, again, outside of courtroom, best, where we maintain a neutrality and where it is only the competing, thought which is being evaluated, not the person or the messenger actually delivering it. Of course, the latter part of the chapter, which deals with, the richness or the success of a lawyer, which is expressed in terms of, the watches or the pens or the accessories which one wears, that is basically a lighter tone to it that obviously should stay out.
We all know about Solicitor General Tushar Mehta's fondness for good pens. He
Yeah.
can look at a friend from afar and tell you which one it is. I mean, provided it's a unique brand, I mean, something.
Yeah, and therefore that lends that kind of familiarity, which is best avoided when when you're across the bar. That kind of familiarity or that kind of fondness is best avoided. So therefore, neutrality is a very key aspect of the function, and the best way of maintaining it is to maintain uniformity in presentation. And I think the chapter very eloquently sort of presents the idea of that oneness and uniformity.
I'll go to Advocate Namisha Gupta for her opening comment.
Hi, Tarun. So, what I genuinely appreciated about the chapter in black and white is that Sir does not treat the lawyer's uniform merely as a dress code. I think he goes in slightly deeper to explain the philosophy and symbolism behind it. He explains how the uniform represents the majesty of law and the discipline, equality, humanity, humility behind it. One of the strongest ideas in the chapter for me was that once a lawyer wears a robe, personal vanity, brands, wealth, and individuality recede into the background. And what emerges is simply that an officer of the court. I found it very powerful when he says that the robe conceals ego, bearing, and conduct, not wealth and vanity. One anecdote from the chapter that stayed with me was from the COVID era, when virtual hearings completely changed the traditional courtroom environment. Mr. Mehta refers to incidents during online hearings where lawyers appeared in vests, pajamas, slippers, casual clothes, or even from their beds during these proceedings. He humorously mentions a report from a Florida judge who observed one male lawyer appearing shirtless and another attorney attending while still in bed under the covers. And he also discusses instances where parties have attempted to justify unconventional courtroom attire under the First Amendment right to freedom of expression by wearing political badges, as Sir just mentioned, slogan-based clothing, or other forms of personal expressions inside courtrooms. However, courts repeatedly emphasized that while freedom of expression is a constitutional right, a courtroom remains a disciplined institutional space where decorum and neutrality must be prevailed over individuals' display. So, what I felt was that despite the humor in these incidents and anecdotes, they make a serious point that the courtroom decorum is not confined to physical courtroom alone. Even in virtual settings, the dignity of the institution and the discipline associated with the legal profession must be continued to be preserved.
Thank you for that opening comment, Namisha. I'll go to Senior Advocate Percival Bilimoria for his opening comment.
Thanks, Tarun. I was having some difficulty with modern day gadgets,
But
which is not
we
unusual.
are happy to have you back.
Right. So, yes, so this is a subject that I have very strong views. So ultimately, I have very strong views on this. I do believe that clothes make it the man. I remember my father telling me that, look, when you don the vardi, yeah, so when there is a soldier at the border who dons his uniform, then he psychologically takes on the sense of responsibility for protecting our borders. And when he steps out of the body, he becomes a common man with a family, leading a normal life. So I think the clothes, when you step into the uniform, and I think, uh, Tushar Bhai has mentioned that this is in a way our uniform. And that's extremely important because, I mean, quite apart from the Banyan incident, and the button incident that my colleagues have already referred to, I think he talks about, uh, there are several anecdotes there. There was one French Israeli lawyer who uh, appeared on the cover of a magazine in the nude. And he was roundly criticized because ultimately we also have to know that even outside court, the the general public, the judges, the litigants, they judge us from what we are and how we appear even outside the court. So the decorum is important both inside and outside. But I'm very firmly of the view that the band and the gown, they're not just symbols. And in fact, I can tell you that I would be one of the few lawyers in Delhi who would say that it's a pity that you discard the gown in Delhi in the summers. One can imagine it's because of the heat, but it's just not the same.
Point well taken, Mr. Bilimoria. I'll go to Senior Advocate Vivek Kohli for his second comment. And of course, Mr. Kohli, you could also share an anecdote from your life in addition to what Mr. Mehta wrote, taking inspiration from the same. You're not. You may want to unmute yourself.
So, effectively, again, the same thing. Actually, if you see, Namisha is absolutely right. When you wear the gown and you wear the coat, it effectively, sort of impersonalizes you. Then you're only an officer of the court, and it's not your ego, not your accessories or whatever other things which represent you. It's essentially you are representing somebody. And the message that you convey is more important than the messenger. So that part, protecting that link where the message and the thought which is to be evaluated in court, or let's say the legal argument which is to be evaluated in court, the protection of that, so that there's no distraction. As Mr. Mehta also in the book says that there should be no distraction from the main purpose of the exercise. That's superbly important. Okay. Now, many times you have in court, and I remember this from my younger days. So, in the early 90s when I had just joined the profession, for an anecdote. So I still remember this quite charming lady, much elder to us. She came and she walked into the courtroom, and she had a very, very nice and possibly strange hairdo, which was like, sort of 6, 8 inches above her head. As a young man, I was quite confused whether she's, sort of coming from a marriage function or going to one, and the court is just like, sort of a pit stop kind of thing. And she got a yelling from court. I still remember the Chief Justice in the court said that, this is not, and why I remember the marriage function is because he said this is not a marriage function. You can't come to court like this. This kind of hairdo is a big distraction. And it kind of, sort of disturbs our concentration, and you can't really do this. And I thought it was very amusing because she thought it was just something which was like, making her more presentable, but maybe too presentable, and sort of lending to some kind of a distraction. So that was like an early learning, early days, that you stick to the code, you don't disturb it too much, you don't go out of line, and you stay the course. Yeah.
Point very well taken. In fact, in a recent clip viral on social media, a lawyer was having, I think, gutka or some product like that, and the judge ordered him out of the court because his speech was getting affected. Once a lawyer appeared without a band, and again he was ordered to come back again with the band. He will not be allowed to argue. I'll go to Advocate Namisha Gupta for her second comment.
So, Tarun, I feel that when we talk about uniforms, as Sir has really tried to bring out in this chapter, uniforms have always carried a deeper purpose beyond appearance. And this is something which is inculcated in us right from our schooling or across the entire world. In schools, uniform teach children from a very young age that respect, order, discipline come much before individual display. And similarly, in the medical profession, the white coat inspires trust and reassurance. And so in the legal profession, I feel the black coat and white band symbolize neutrality, seriousness, and service to justice. In fact, if you see the motto of Supreme Court, it's Yato Dharmastato Jaya, which especially I think in a country like India, which is as socially and economically diverse, becomes even more important. In remote courts across regions like Chhattisgarh, rural Uttar Pradesh, Jharkhand, Northeast, litigants and advocates may come from vastly different backgrounds, educational-wise, social backgrounds, economic backgrounds. And for many people entering the courtroom for the first time, the black robe and the white band becomes the immediate symbol of law itself. The uniform removes visible distinctions of all wealth, status, caste, language, and any other background that a lawyer or even a judge may carry. So whether a lawyer is wealthy or comes from modest means, whether the litigant is influential or vulnerable, the uniform communicates that everyone stands equal before the justice system. And like I mentioned about the motto of the Supreme Court, I think judges in their robes also cease to be individuals and become visible embodiment of justice itself through this uniform.
Namisha, one follow-up question. Like when you wear the court attire and go, like recently you defended a sexual assault victim who was a minor. Do you get that feeling of being, power would be a wrong word, but what do you feel when you sort of don that attire and go to court?
I think for me, it's that sense of justice that today I have to do my best to bring law to give these whosoever I'm representing justice, a sense of justice. And I think when all of us in the court are in one attire, the communication becomes so comfortable. It's like all barriers are removed and you can just communicate in that language of justice to each other, to the judges, to your colleagues, to even the other side. And for the litigants, we are representation of that justice.
Point well taken. And
just to add to what Nimisha said, when you use that word, that power would be possibly not the correct thing, as Nimisha said, it's a symbol of justice. A sense of duty more than power and responsibility is possibly, the word Nimisha also would like to use on,
correct.
the
Absolutely,
sense.
sir.
Yeah, that duty and responsibility once you wear the robes that dawns on you is really the crucial bit here.
Point well taken. I'll go to Senior Advocate Percival Bilimoria. Somebody gossiped to me that though your clothes look simple, you get them from some high-end shop in London, if I'm not wrong. So I think you definitely have a taste in clothes, though they may look black and white. Your
Yeah.
clothing.
So see, it's really also how the clothes make you feel as an individual. So see, we all tend to judge people also by what they wear, how they look, hairstyles. So see, look, my grandfather used to sport in his very early days a Hitler mustache. Okay, after the Second War and after the horrors of what the Nazis did, uh, that fashion is completely out, and nobody really wears a Hitler mustache nowadays anymore because your hairstyle, etc. It represents something, and nobody wants to be associated with that era anymore. And that's just a very good example. So, some of the, I still remember that, when I was designated, Mr. Gopal Subramaniam, presented me with my gown. And it was a genuine silk gown, which is also important to note because a lot of the gowns that people wear in India are not really silk. You see, that's one very important thing. And ultimately, look, it's about order and decorum, as the Solicitor General has rightly noted. But it's also the way you feel. So that I'm a very fun-loving guy, right? I mean, outside court, I like to do many things. I have many hobbies. But when you don that, so-called, call it uniform or whatever it may be, you step into a different world, and then mentally you are then ready to talk and talk like a lawyer and represent your client to the best of your ability.
Point very well taken. It was a very interesting conversation today on the topic, the chapter in black and white from S.G. Tushar Mehta's book, The Bench, Bar, and the Bazaar. I would like to thank Senior Advocate Vivek Kohli, Senior Advocate Percival Bilimoria, Advocate Namisha Gupta for making it interesting, sharing their insights, and making us understand that why an attire is an extension of how one Indian feels, and brings in a certain camaraderie in the court system when everyone is equal. you may be whoever outside court, but inside there is a feeling that, a lawyer with a 3 or 4 year practice and somebody who's put in 2 decades also would treat each other with respect, because we, they are bound by some common ideals. I think SG, Solicitor General Tushar Mehta, conveyed that as through the chapter. Thank you so much for joining in for this one. Thank you so very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Tarun.
Thank you, Tarun.
Thank you.